Okay, my team breakdown today will be on the 1980 Baltimore Orioles, the 100 win Baltimore Orioles, who did not win the American League East that year. And at the end of the video, I'll be doing a side by side comparison of the 80 Orioles and another team from 1980. If you saw my recent videos, you heard me speak on the 1980 Orioles specifically in one video. So if you saw that video, you probably have a good idea of who I'm going to be doing a side by side comparison of. But first, let's go through the 1980 Baltimore Orioles. First, let's get started with their offense. And their top of the order was Al Bumry and Rich Dower. And you see their on base chance numbers there. Those numbers are pretty good. Let's take a look at the 3-4 hitters. Pretty consistently, it was Eddie Murray 3 and Ken Singleton 4. First, I'll show you their hits with multiple base advancement for Eddie Murray and Ken Singleton. You see, those numbers don't really jump out at you as being great numbers, but they're still solid numbers out of your 3-4 hitters. And what I like about those numbers is that they're not affected either way from hitting from either side of the plate. Both Eddie Murray and Ken Singleton were both obviously switch hitters, and facing righties, lefties didn't really affect them really either way. Now you see their on base chances, and you can see Ken Singleton has a little higher chance of reaching base versus right-handed pitching than he does lefties, but all those numbers check out as well. So what I really like about Eddie Murray and Ken Singleton is that not only are they very well adept at driving runners in, but they also help continue by adding traffic on the base paths because both of them are very good at getting on base as well. Now, the next player I'm going to break down is John Lowenstein, who obviously was a platoon player. He would play usually left field, sometimes right, but usually left field against right-handed pitching. And you see, first I'm going to show you his on base chances, and now you see his hits with multiple base advancement. Now I'm going to show you the guy that he generally platooned with in left field. That's Gary Renicky. You see his numbers there. Again, his numbers are a little bit low when it comes to hits with multiple base advancement by a base runner, but you see his on base chances, and those numbers check out pretty well also. Now let's take a look at the third baseman, Doug DeCinces. You see his on base chances there. That's a very good number. And you see his numbers against lefties driving runners in. That's a pretty decent number for a guy who generally hit anywhere from maybe he would hit fifth against lefties to as low as maybe seventh against righties, but those are solid numbers. Now, let me break down two more offensive players, and this is really going to work into my offensive depth score as far as like righty lefty mix and interchangeable parts as you get deeper into the lineup and you start looking for guys you could bring off the bench. Let me first look at Benny Ayala's numbers. Now, you could use him as either a DH against left-handed pitching or obviously bring him off the bench to pinch hit against left-handed pitching if he doesn't happen to start because there is a righty starter. You see both his on base chances and his hits with multiple base advancement. So those are both very solid numbers. Now let's take a look at Terry Crowley's numbers. Terry Crowley was basically understood as the DH against right-handed pitching. And you see both his on base chances and his hits with multiple base advancement. So as I assess the 1980 Baltimore Orioles offense, all the numbers check out pretty good. Not great. You got to remember, 1980 was the year after Ken Singleton had his MVP, or I should say co-MVP year in 1979. And Eddie Murray had a solid year as well, but if anyone has collected a lot of Strat-O-Matic cards, you'll see that his cards got a lot better as his career went on. This Eddie Murray card was a little subdued compared to others. So the way I grade out the Baltimore Orioles offense is I gave their top of the order where I basically grade strictly on base chances. How good are your one or two guys at getting on base? I gave that part of the offense a 3.5 out of 5. I gave the middle of the order the same score there with a 3.5 out of 5. It could have reached a 4 had Murray and Singleton's numbers of multiple base advancement with hits if those numbers were a little bit higher, but I still graded them out at a 3.5 out of 5, which is still a solid number. But as far as righty lefty mix, I give them a perfect score of a 5 out of 5 because I do like the fact that they're 3-4 hitters or switch hitters. You have a very dependable and reliable platoon in left field with John Lowenstein and Gary Renicky. Doug DeCince's numbers are much better against left-handed pitching, but that's made up by the fact that you've got Benny Ayala and Terry Crowley to use either off the bench or you could platoon them at DH. And I didn't get into Rick Dempsey's card. He's a very qualified number 8 hitter in the lineup who has a pretty solid card. So for me, that was an easy score as far as the Baltimore Orioles' depth of their offense in 1980. I gave them perfect 5 out of 5 score. So their total offensive score for the 1980 team comes out at a 4 out of 5, which is an excellent score. Now, let me take a look at the defense here real quick. You are very, very solid at second base with Rich Dower. And when you play Mark Belanger at short, obviously you're always going to be good. I gave the Orioles middle infield defense a 4 out of 5. Same thing with the outfield defense. I like the fact that Renicky and Lowenstein both field their positions very well. Al Bummery is very useful in center field, and your right field defense is solid as well. Couldn't give them a perfect score of a 5 out of 5 because none of them are ones, but I definitely feel good about giving them a 4 out of 5 in the outfield. For the overall E ratings on the team, I gave them a perfect score of a 5 out of 5 because I really like the E ratings at second base, shortstop, and center field. And there's really no holes when it comes to any of the E ratings on this team. Doug DeCinces has a very manageable E rating at third base. So I gave the Orioles E rating score a 5 out of 5. So their overall defensive score came out at a 4.3 out of 5, which is very, very good. Now let's take a look at the starting rotation. First, let's get started with the ace that year, Steve Stone, and you see his on base chances when you roll his card versus righties and lefties. You see those numbers check out pretty good, especially against right-handed hitting. If you stack your lineup against him with left-handed batters, then you definitely have a chance to create a little more traffic on the base paths as he has a little string of walks there in his 4 column. So I do like Steve Stone's card. However, I could not give him a perfect rating of a 5 out of 5. I gave the ace a rating of a 4 out of 5. Now, let's take a look at the starting rotation depth where you got Scott McGregor, Jim Palmer, Mike Flanagan, and Dennis Martinez. Now, Dennis Martinez only started 12 games that year, but you could use him obviously as a starter in Strat-O-Matic as he had starter relief on his card. And I'm going to show you the numbers first for Scott McGregor and Jim Palmer versus lefties and versus righties. Their on base chances. You see those numbers check out very good. Mike Flanagan in 1980, he definitely had a little bit of a down year compared to especially what he did in 1979 when he won the Cy Young Award. Those numbers are a little bit high there, but it's still a very manageable card, especially when you consider the fact that he was basically the number 4 starter on that team. And then we take a look at Dennis Martinez's numbers. So again, when it comes to starting rotation depth, I could not give this starting rotation a perfect score at a 5 out of 5, but I did give them a very solid score of a 4 out of 5. So their overall starting rotation graded out as a 4 out of 5. Now let's take a look at the bullpen. Let's start with the closer, Tim Stoddard, 2-inning reliever. You see his on base chances right there. All right. And then I'm going to get into 2 of the setup guys. You got Tippy Martinez and Sammy Stewart. You could see Tippy Martinez's numbers check out pretty good, and Sammy Stewart's numbers. Again, that number versus left-handed batters is a little bit high, but what I do like about the bullpen is that you have a reliable lefty reliever in Tippy Martinez, who is also a 3 inning reliever, by the way. So that comes in handy in some games. And you do have a solid closer in Tim Stoddard, and Sammy Stewart is a very manageable middle relief guy. So overall, I graded out the Baltimore Orioles bullpen for 1980 as a 4 out of 5. Now, as we look at the Baltimore Orioles overall score, you're going to see that they grade out as a 4.08, just under a 4.1. So very solid score, very comfortably over that magical four number. Because again, like I always say, if you score 4 or higher, then you're a very good team. And I could tell you, this is a very, very solid Strat-O-Matic team. And real quick, I'm going to go through a quick side-by-side comparison that I did with the 1980 Orioles and the 1980 Yankees. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail on 1980 Yankees. It's not going to be a full breakdown. I'm just going to show you the numbers. But the reason why I always wanted to sit down and do this since I started doing these videos was because if you saw my video on my 1980s Yankees full season results of the season that I played with them in Strat-O-Matic a while back, you heard me talk about how I really felt like the 1980 Orioles were the better team in Strat-O-Matic in 1980. Number one, I remember playing that season and I only went 5-8 against the Baltimore Orioles in 1980. So, real quick, just let me run through the numbers real quick for the 1980 Yankees. I had their offense grade out of 3.5. Their defense scored a 2 out of 5. And what killed that score was because I had to do something with this team that I never did before. With their outfield defense, I had to give them a 0 out of 5 because that outfield defense was just atrocious. The starting pitching checked out very good. It came out at a 4.25, which actually comes out higher than my score for the 1980 Orioles. And the bullpen came out a 4 for the 1980 Yankees. So my overall score for the 1980 Yankees came out at a 3.4, and my overall score for the 1980 Orioles came out at a 4.08. And I also really wanted to do this video on the 1980 Orioles because I remember when the current edition of the Baltimore Orioles, the 2023 team, when they reached the 100 win mark, I remember that night seeing a graphic that it was the first Oriole team since 1980 to win 100 games. And that kind of like took me back a little bit, where I was a little bit surprised that it took a great franchise like the Baltimore Orioles over 40 years to win 100 games. Now, I know they did not win 100 games in either 82 or 83. Obviously, 82 was the year they essentially played a one-game playoff against the Milwaukee Brewers on the final day of the regular season. I know they didn't win 100 games in 1983 when they won the World Series, but I would have guessed maybe the 1997 team maybe won 100, or maybe one of the teams in the 20 teens when Buck Showalter was the manager and they went to the back-to-back American League Championship Series. I never would have guessed it would have taken that the last time the Orioles had won 100 games would have been 1980. So that kind of took me back a little bit. But anyways, that's my assessment on the 1980 Baltimore Orioles. I definitely suggest if you do come across this team, or if you get the 1980 set, definitely check this team out. It is a really, really good team. So that's my assessment on the 1980 Baltimore Orioles. Have a good day, everyone.